There exists a man who sees the world differently, not through louder words or faster actions, but through the quiet storms that rage inside his mind. While others rush through life collecting moments, he pauses, dissects, and questions everything until the weight of understanding becomes both his greatest gift and his heaviest burden. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me, and please like and subscribe for more videos like this. He sits alone in a crowded coffee shop, watching people move like programmed machines, following patterns they never question. His fingers tap slowly against the table, not from nervousness, but from the hundreds of thoughts competing for attention inside his skull. Every conversation he overhears becomes a puzzle he cannot help but solve. Every gesture a window into motivations that others never notice. While his colleagues discuss weekend plans and sports scores, his mind wanders to why humans need constant distraction, why silence terrifies most people, why shallow connections feel safer than deep ones. He does not speak much, and when he does, people lean in because his words carry weight that casual chatter never holds. But before those words leave his lips, they have traveled through layers of analysis, been tested against 1,000 scenarios, filtered through empathy and logic until only the truth remains. His silence is not emptiness, but fullness, a universe expanding inside a single moment, while the world outside moves at a speed that feels almost violent to him. He knows that most people mistake his quietness for arrogance or disinterest, never realizing he is drowning in interest, suffocating under the weight of caring too much about everything. At work, he completes his tasks with precision, but his mind is elsewhere, asking questions nobody else thinks to ask. Why does everyone accept this routine without question? What dreams died in the hearts of these people who shuffle papers and fake smiles? How many versions of themselves did they bury to fit into this box called normalcy? His coworkers call him intense, strange, too serious for simple pleasures that everyone else enjoys without complication. They do not understand that for him, nothing is simple. Every joke has layers. Every smile hides something deeper. Every moment connects to a larger pattern he cannot stop seeing. He walks home through streets filled with noise, advertisements screaming for attention, people glued to screens consuming content that numbs rather than nourishes. He feels the exhaustion creeping in, not from physical labor, but from the constant processing. The endless analysis that his brain performs without permission or pause. His apartment becomes his sanctuary, the only place where the volume of the world finally decreases to a manageable level. He closes the door and feels his shoulders drop, the mask of normalcy slipping away to reveal the raw, sensitive creature underneath, who feels everything with an intensity that most people cannot comprehend. He makes tea and sits by the window, watching the city lights flicker like dying stars, each one representing a life, a story, a struggle that matters more than anyone acknowledges. His empathy is not a choice, but a curse, feeling the pain of strangers, carrying the weight of problems that are not his to solve, yet impossible to ignore. The night deepens and his thoughts spiral, questioning his place in a world that rewards speed over depth, noise over reflection, surface over substance. He wonders if something is broken inside him, if his way of thinking is a flaw rather than a feature. If life would be easier if he could just stop digging beneath every moment. The questions multiply like shadows as darkness fills his room, each one demanding attention he no longer has the energy to give. Books line his shelves, each one a conversation with minds that understood this burden. Writers and thinkers who also saw too much, felt too deeply, questioned too relentlessly. He finds comfort in their words, proof that he is not alone in this strange way of existing, that depth is not a disease, but a different kind of vision. But the comfort is temporary, because the overthinking returns like waves against rocks, eroding his peace with doubts and what-ifs, and endless mental simulations of conversations that never happened. Sleep becomes difficult because his mind refuses to rest, spinning new theories, analyzing old interactions, replaying moments that most people forgot within seconds. He notices patterns in human behavior that make him simultaneously fascinated and exhausted, the way people lie to themselves. The defense mechanisms they build, the truths they avoid because facing them requires courage most do not possess. He sees through facades, not because he is judgmental, but because his mind cannot help but seek authenticity. In a world drowning in pretense, his creativity flows from this depth, ideas connecting in unusual ways, art emerging from the chaos of overthinking, solutions appearing where others see only problems. But the world does not always reward this kind of thinking. It demands quick answers, surface-level engagement, content over substance, speed over accuracy. He sits in meetings where decisions are made without consideration of consequences, where profit outweighs humanity, where the future is sacrificed for the comfort of the present. His voice, when he speaks, often disrupts the easy flow of groupthink, introducing complications that others wish he would keep to himself. They label him difficult, a pessimist, someone who thinks too much and enjoys too little, never understanding that his questions come from a place of deep care, desire for things to be better, more real, more meaningful than the hollow performances everyone seems content to maintain. He watches his colleagues nod along to decisions that feel wrong and wonders when they learn to silence the voice inside that used to question everything. His relationships are few but profound because he cannot engage in shallow connections that drain rather than nourish his already exhausted mind. He seeks people who are willing to dive deep, to explore uncomfortable truths, to sit in silence without needing to fill it with meaningless words. But finding such people is rare, and the loneliness becomes another weight he carries, knowing that his depth often isolates him from the very connections he craves. He watches couples in parks, friends laughing over simple jokes, families gathered around tables, and wonders if he traded belonging for understanding. The price of seeing clearly is standing slightly outside the warmth of easy togetherness. Years pass and he learns to navigate this existence with more grace, understanding that his mind is not something to fix, but something to manage. He discovers meditation, not to stop thinking, but to observe his thoughts without being consumed by them, to create distance between himself and the endless mental commentary. He starts keeping a journal, pouring the overflow of his mind onto pages where the thoughts can rest instead of circling endlessly inside his head. The act of writing becomes therapeutic, transforming chaos into structure, giving shape to the formless anxiety that comes from processing too much information without release. But even with these tools, the fundamental challenge remains because the world keeps spinning at its frantic pace while he moves through it at his own measured rhythm. He watches trends come and go, people chasing the next distraction, the next dopamine hit, the next thing that promises fulfillment but delivers only temporary satisfaction. He feels like a time traveler from a different era, one where depth was valued, where conversations lasted hours instead of seconds, where people actually listened instead of just waiting for their turn to speak. The disconnect between his inner world and outer reality creates a constant friction that wears him down in ways that physical labor never could. At a party he barely wanted to attend, someone asks him what he thinks about, what occupies his mind during those long silences everyone notices. He hesitates because the truth is too complex, too strange, too revealing of just how different his internal experience is from what most people consider normal. He tells them he thinks about everything, which is both accurate and completely inadequate. Because how can he explain that he thinks about the nature of consciousness while brushing his teeth, about societal conditioning while walking to the store, about existence while choosing what to eat for lunch? They laugh, thinking he is joking, and he lets them believe it because the alternative is too exhausting to explain. He observes children playing in a park, their joy uncomplicated by the layers of meaning he cannot help but add to everything. He remembers being that way once before the questions started, before the depth became unavoidable, for he realized that most adults are just children who learn to hide their confusion behind confidence in routine. Part of him envies their simplicity, their ability to exist without constant analysis, to enjoy a moment without dissecting it into components and questioning its authenticity. But he knows he could never go back, that the door to shallow living closed behind him long ago, that this depth is now as fundamental to his existence as breathing. His career suffers because he cannot fake enthusiasm for meaningless projects, cannot pretend that quarterly profits matter more than human well-being, cannot participate in the theater of corporate culture without his discomfort showing through. He changes jobs multiple times, searching for a place where depth is valued, where questions are welcomed, where thinking is not seen as a liability, He eventually finds work that allows him to use his mind in ways that feel meaningful, researching problems that matter, creating solutions that consider long-term consequences, contributing to something larger than just the accumulation of wealth. The pay is less than he could earn elsewhere, but the alignment with his values makes the sacrifice worthwhile. Late one night, he sits in his favorite chair, surrounded by books and notebooks, filled with observations about life, humanity, consciousness, meaning. He realizes that his struggle is not unique to him, but shared by countless others throughout history who felt this same burden of seeing too much, understanding too deeply, caring too intensely about a world that often seems determined to remain unconscious. He thinks about the artists who channeled their depth into creation, the philosophers who transformed their questions into wisdom, the scientists who turned their curiosity into discovery. He understands now that this way of being is not a curse to overcome, but a responsibility to embrace. That the world needs people who refuse to accept easy answers, who dig beneath surfaces, who ask uncomfortable questions that lead to necessary changes. His exhaustion begins to shift into something else. Not quite acceptance, but a kind of warrior spirit. A determination to keep thinking deeply even when it hurts. To keep feeling fully even when it overwhelms. To keep questioning everything even when others want him to just accept and move on. He sees his depth as a form of resistance against a culture that profits from keeping people distracted. Numb and intellectually passive, he starts sharing his thoughts more openly, writing essays that explore the complexities he sees, creating art that expresses the internal landscapes others cannot access. Speaking up in conversations, even when his perspective makes people uncomfortable. Some reject his ideas, threatened by implications that challenge their comfortable worldviews. But others respond with relief, grateful to finally hear someone articulating what they felt but could not express. He meets a woman at a lecture who understands without explanation, whose eyes reflect the same depth, the same burden, the same beautiful curse of seeing beyond surfaces. Their conversation lasts hours, words flowing like water that has finally found its level. Ideas building on each other without the usual social friction that comes from mismatched wavelengths. For the first time in years, he does not feel alone in his strangeness, does not have to translate his thoughts into simpler forms, does not have to pretend that small talk satisfies his need for connection. She becomes his anchor, proof that depth can find depth, that the isolation is not permanent, that others exist who navigate this same strange territory between worlds. Together they create a life that honors their nature, building routines that protect their energy, choosing relationships carefully, designing an existence that allows them to think deeply without apologizing for it. They host gatherings where real conversations happen, where masks come off, where people explore ideas instead of just exchanging gossip and complaints. Their home becomes a refuge for other deep thinkers, a place where the weirdness is celebrated rather than tolerated, where questions are more valued than answers, where silence is comfortable and depth is the default rather than the exception. He realizes that community can exist even for those who think differently, that belonging does not require conformity, that there are others who have been searching for the same thing he has, but the world outside their sanctuary remains unchanged, still racing toward destruction with cheerful ignorance, still prioritizing profit over people, still rewarding shallow confidence over genuine wisdom. He watches the news and sees patterns repeating, mistakes being made that history already taught, voices of depth being drowned out by louder but emptier rhetoric. The frustration returns because knowing the problems and being powerless to fix them creates its own special torture for minds that cannot stop caring, cannot stop analyzing, cannot stop hoping that reason and empathy might eventually prevail over greed and fear. He learns to accept that he cannot save the world, cannot force consciousness onto those who prefer sleep, cannot make people value depth in a culture addicted to speed. His impact becomes quieter, more personal, more focused on the individuals he can reach rather than the masses he cannot change. He mentors younger thinkers who are just discovering their depth, helping them navigate the challenges he faced, showing them they are not broken, teaching them how to protect their sensitivity while still engaging with a harsh world. He writes letters to people who reach out after reading his work, offering encouragement to those who feel alone in their overthinking, validating their experiences, reminding them that depth is a gift, even when it feels like a burden. Each connection becomes a small victory against the isolation that deep thinking can create. A thread in a larger web of consciousness that exists beneath the surface noise of modern life. As years turn into decades, he notices changes in himself, not a dulling of his depth, but a strengthening of his capacity to carry it. The weight becomes familiar, the overthinking becomes manageable, the sensitivity becomes a tool he can control rather than a force that controls him. He learns when to engage his full depth and when to give his mind rest, when to dive into complexity and when to simply exist without analysis. The balance is delicate and constantly shifting, but he becomes skilled at reading his own energy, at knowing his limits, at honoring his needs without judgment or shame. He sits now in the same chair where this journey of understanding began, older but not harder, tired but not defeated, still thinking deeply about everything while the world continues its frantic dance outside his window. He has made peace with his strangeness, embraced his burden, transformed his curse into purpose. The deep thinker does not win by changing who he is, but by fully becoming who he is. By refusing to apologize for his depth, by continuing to question and feel and analyze, even when the world tells him to stop. His rebellion is complete, not when the world accepts him, but when he accepts himself. Not when others understand his depth, but when he stops needing them to. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe for more videos like this.